Welcome to Mucho TV, where we learn from one another and grow. My name is Janvier Nahimana. I'm with my special guest, Sylvia Parris Drummond. She is the CEO of Delomore Validae Learning Institute. Our conversation today will focus on Nova Scotian communities, decade of people of African descent, how coronavirus impacted community services, building an African descent media. I apologize for the video quality. The interview has been recorded via Zoom due to the COVID-19.
So I think it's useful to, and we've said a little bit, but to acknowledge, some of our understanding about where really ancestry we are. And so in terms of, incontinent, embodied in kings and queens and leaders, right, in that regard. And so for waves that we speak about here, when we speak about folks who identify generationally being here, it's the loyalists, Black loyalists. There's also been the Black refugees, of course, talked about. And then recently we hear waves in terms of, planters, which is kind of, I think, talked about as being in between the timing. So 1812 for the refugees, and then back in the 1700s in terms of the Black loyalists. So with a common thread of coming here and understanding an offer of access to land, the ability to have your own agency, work for yourself and your family, have value in who you are as an individual, and as a person, as a human. So those were, and then, that grew communities here, right? So the Preston Townships area is referred to as now, but if you, distinct Preston communities in Nova Scotia, and then communities, Danvers, for example, down South Shore Way, and down my way, where I grew up in Mulgrave itself had a within that geographic boundaries, a small but vibrant Black community. So in terms, of that, and then, in Truro itself, so there's within those boundaries, there's also self-identified or understood Black communities. And we go anywhere from 52 to 54 in terms of how we understand historic Black communities. So there is a long, generationally rich history here in terms of that regard. And then, as we've acknowledged, waves continued in different ways, and people understand themselves to be coming in groups or as individuals. Again, with the kind of the common piece about agency, to do for myself, to be valued for what I contributed. Folks that come here and have come here in those waves, had skills, builder skills, mason skills, different things in that aspect that did not get valued and compensated and understood and spoken about, very distinctly in the sharing of our history in the public realm as well as in community. So when we are able to have voice and influence on our stories, it's really important to have that first person voice perspective, our community understanding. And through some of the work that we do here, we're specifically trying to influence that content, and we're always ensuring that we make space for community voice.
Is DBDLI a member of DPAD?
The African Nova Scotian Decade for People of African Descent Coalition? Mm-hmm. Yes.
What DPAD means and how it will impact our community?
Right. I mean, so there's three aspects of an answer to that. So I'll start with ourselves. So as being around the table has a kind of a sector piece around education, and as a space to share what we're doing and learn from others. Health is there, justice, whatever. Individuals are there. So it's a very open and transparent and engaging place to be. for folks across the province. It's African Nova Scotian, so it's province specific in that regard. Takes the 3 pillars that are for the decade. So let me see if I can remember them. I always only remember 2. So justice, development, and recognition. And under development is where we talk about education and youth specifically. So yeah, so all of those things are there. We were talking about kind of a venue or an avenue for sharing. So it's a great avenue for sharing updates, what's happening. It's come out as a collective voice in some issues. What sparked Black Lives Matters here, or maybe I should say reignited, because it's been here before. So they're part of that piece, and they have, the ASN DPAD coalition has a structure in place. It has staff to help support things. The aspect of a second piece aspect I want to connect with is that there is kind of a cross connect with the provincial government's commitment around the decade. So the Count Us In document, a piece of work, what had the opportunity to be reviewed, have a look at before it got finalized through that structure. I would be hesitant to say the numbers that are there. I mean, as I said, the organizations and individuals in there, so there's lots, there's maybe 30, maybe more or less, depending on the day, in that regard. So I think there's, what I really appreciate about it is the conversation and the perspectives and the really kind of, what I would say, critical thinking and conversations that can happen with that body. And then the other, I said I wanted to make kind of a few connections in it. The other thing in terms of it is that somewhat like ourselves individually, it is also trying to have a connection nationally. So there's organizations, Meeting of the Minds, which is like a national think tank that we're linked into in terms of participating in Zoom meetings and sharing documentation and such. There's the UN Push DPAD, which is kind of another national structure that came to be, and both of them came to be really as a place, as I said, again, across Canada, and across Canada has authentic as working to be authentic as you can be when you say that. So like with Meeting of the Minds, Nunavut, down here to the Atlantic, and then parts in between, and just, so a real space for that. So I think back to your question around the coalition, and it does have a website, which I couldn't recite for you, but it's searchable. I think folks will find like kind of interesting things there, information there, and the ability to participate, to become part of that. And once you do that, once you've kind of been on those calls, right now they're all virtual calls, and there always would have been an aspect of virtual to be provincial. This is much the same as us, always would have been that aspect. So so there's a way to give, share ideas, and have good conversation. But it started, birth, if I might say that way, in connection with the decade. We would imagine as it grows and thrives that it would be beyond the decade. Although which is, it's 2024, right? I think. Although I have heard a push because of the late start with the various with the federal government, the various provincial governments late coming on to proclaim it. There's some ask out there, I'm not sure who's leading it, to have that extended. So that might occur as well. Something that was distributed as a community information, right, and an opportunity for engagement. And I hopefully that's not new in terms of community hearing, broader community, Nova Scotian community hearing about that, because that has been talked about. Dr. Afua Cooper, for example, some things that have also happened via King's College, things that have happened again that have empowered like youth voice. So I would imagine people would see that as part of the various ways that we're being asked as Nova Scotians, and probably with that type of thing it can go across to Canada and further, we're being asked to give deep thinking about the impact of enslavement from various aspects. So how it has situated people in terms of compounded lack of access, compounding in terms of barriers, who intentionally or unintentionally in terms of structures that exist today that have benefited from it. So I think it's all wrapped up kind of in that understanding. So there's a range in terms of community services, and so that we could think about. People probably have their own definitions under it as well, but we think about the impact on people's health, very, very tragic impacts, I would say, in terms of that, because we have structures that had not put in their thinking and planning the disproportionate impact of that, of COVID on African Canadians, African Nova Scotians, African Nova Scotian communities, because of the historical, again, and sometimes when people, I think, hear the mention of historical, they have trouble really making the connection between the importance of understanding that in the conversation we have today. And so when we talk about not understanding the disproportionality of some complicating health issues that have to do with how people were treated and situated, and how systems have not done a good job of understanding our health needs and how we are situated. So there's that aspect. And then the other, in terms of a broader thing, if we think about how we interact, in a relational way, in an in-person way a lot, and we've had to figure out how to adapt to that. I think to the acknowledgement of that is one important piece of that, how the planning, but also, in this phraseology of pivot, like how people kind of had to pull back for a minute and do some planning that would allow us to be relational and to be engaged. And so the other things that showed up for that is how we're so mindful about supporting our elders, and people stepped up individually, and systems began to establish to support folks who are needing to stay in place at home, and what that might mean to them in terms of, an access to what's important to them. So their basic needs around food security, but also in terms of the importance of faith. And so how we continue to do that. So in many ways, we again, as a community, showed our resilience, which we've had to do over time, about how we were able to come together and to respond to that. And it gave an opportunity for structures, policies, and systems that are in place to really have a navel-gazing look, and to pay attention to how, on an ongoing basis, they have not been valuing the diversity within the diversities of our communities, and have not in a structured way been planning for or responding to what those needs might be in terms of community. And of course, we're starting to see some, I don't know if of course was the right word there, but we're starting to see some comfort level with acknowledging racism, particularly anti-Black racism, and the roles that all folks need to play in addressing that. Not just the words of acknowledging it, but this is a chance via this crisis that has been presented to us to really make some substantive changes. So we're hopeful that some of the talk I'm hopeful, and I think my communities are hopeful that what we've heard from institutions and structures in government and in the private world are really going to continue their commitment to make sustained change. So we have a variety of ways. We have an email, general email, contact@dbdli.ca. And we really welcome people to go to our website, dbdli.ca. and subscribe to us so you can keep informed about automatically about what's happening with us. And there's lots of information on the site. We have Instagram, we have Twitter, and so I hope just a general look at that. And we have a Facebook page. And all of those are, if you go on our website and scroll to near to the bottom, you'll see the connector links for all of those. And our general, the general office line is 902-407-3200. And then you can listen for a particular staff identified, and then you can go to that extension.
We learn about what happened in the African community late, how we can centralize, because, you know, most of our members who want to advertise, they advertise on their Facebook. So you may not be a friend on Facebook, so you are not informed. We can go beyond of that and create our own media and try just to centralize. We can share. It's not about me, it's about community, and we have a different talent. If we can bring them together and we can advocate to get our media, it can be really helpful.
And I think even kind of enhancing what we know about, or reminding folks that we know about, like this, okay, so this forum, you know, there's a couple of folks who are really good distributors of information. And so the more that we can be kind of on those listservs that way, and the folks that are on those listservs, like we have some groups that we know, like, as you said, maybe they don't access social media, Facebook, you know, Instagram, whatever. But if folks know that, and we do, because we know each other well across community, then they can be more deliberate about sharing that information. So phone that person up and say, hey, I know you may not have seen this in from other ways, but I want to let you know what's happening. Or you have the capacity, print it off and drop it in somebody's mailbox. I mean, this is an opportunity for us as well across communities to be kind of mindful and supportive of each other. In that, like I said, for some of those folks that know things, and for the folks that are using technology, like, continue to use that well, do the share, do the promote. Like, we have a forum where, like as I said, we send it out to our listserv folks, to the folks who have signed up to receive things from us. And like I said, if there's some that we know don't have access to that, or aren't on regularly, we'll be very deliberate about reaching out. Like, this is an education thing. I know you're interested in that. I'm gonna let you know. So take the kind of the opportunity to show how we feel, kind of our connectedness and a shared responsibility for each other. Doesn't, you know, may not seem like a big thing to some, but for some folks, they really appreciate that they even have been thought about in that way. So,
no, I think that's really one we need also to leverage the quality of our communication. Just because it's not really now more expensive to create a live broadcast and a live streaming, but we need just to get a team working on that. So we can connect like structures like Black Culture Center, DBDLI, and the other structures like immigrant organization like ADAM, or other organization, or African Young Professionals. And we make a planning for how we're gonna organize our schedule for sharing this information. And like DBDLI, you are advanced, you have space, you have technologies, but you need also people who can be involved. How we can collaborate all this, just to bring also young generation to be part of that, and learn from one another, because I may have a skill that maybe there is another one who is good in camera, and another one who is good in editing, another one who is in promoting events. This program, which is now, they call it OBS, the Open Broadcast Software, is the one they use on any show TV. So we know how to use Zoom, how to use Skype, how to use a gimbal to be in community with a camera which is showing what happened instantly in community. We can make it, but we need that to work together and get a team which can coordinate. So it's why Every time I think about you, about DBDLI, I'm working from home. You see, it's like I'm in a studio, but I'm at home. We can create a studio from different office. We have a studio from your office. It's just a computer, lighting, and how to use technologies. And then we get another office at Black Culture Center. It's just how we're gonna coordinate, and the OBS can broadcast all this in real time and bring communities closer. If we are at the Black Culture Center, we have North Preston, they can come there just to share their stories. And at the same time, we may be in contact with a teacher who is at the Dalhousie, and work together and organize a show. It is just to build a media which is going to be our African descent media.
I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the work that Mucho TV is doing. You know, as you said, I've had opportunity in previous times to be engaged. And so I think that commitment in your way through community voice and sharing what's happening is a really great avenue. And thank you for that.